right, heroes, welcome. It is I, your friendly neighborhood Rabbi John Carrier. Very nice to see you here. Wait, I'm seeing you, you're not seeing me. Let's jump right into it. Hey, everybody. I am very happy to be here with you on the Facebook or on the YouTube or on the Twitch TV arena. We are coming to you live on 3 different platforms. You can chat with us on any one of those platforms. I'm excited because today I'm going to start talking about Parashat Tzav. That is this week's Torah portion. But first I want to say hi to D. Willexen, who is in the chat on Twitch. Can you hear me okay? D. Willexen, nice to see you here. Yesterday we had a little bit of a wardrobe malfunction, only with the sound. So an earmuff malfunction, I guess. So yesterday we had some sound problems, 2 days ago, last broadcast we had some sound problems. I think it's okay. Let me know in the chat if it sounds good. Maybe, yes, it sounds good today, says Nawa64, glad to have you here. So in just a second I want to get into this week's parasha, the Parashat HaShavua, the Torah portion of the week, and it is Tzav, which means commanded. God commanded us to make a bunch of sacrifices. That's kind of a lot of what this Torah portion is about. There's sacrifices for various occasions. If you did something wrong and you want to make up for it, if something great happened in your life and you want to acknowledge it with a donation, that's in here too. There's a little bit about the, let's say, the ordination of the priest. That is, Aharon and his sons are being elevated to the status of priest officially, and it's not just like, you punch a clock one day and you're a janitor, you punch a clock the next day, you're a manager, different job, nobody really notices, you're still punching the clock. It's worthwhile when you appoint people to leadership to sort of show everybody and show them off and to have a ceremony that shows their change in status so that everybody is pretty clear. Even if you knew Aharon from the block, right? Even if you grew up with this guy, you can see in front of everybody that he's being acknowledged as having this special job to do. Melissa Levy says, sounding good. Very nice to see you, Melissa. So we've got sacrifices. We've got an ordination ceremony. It's been a few years since my ordination ceremony. I cherish that memory. It was a lot of fun. It's where I got to wear my hat. I don't know if a lot of people in Pasadena haven't seen me wear my hat yet. I have a pretty dope rabbi hat, I have to say. It was a gift from a mentor and teacher of mine, Rabbi Dan Shevitz. God willing, I'll get to the occasion to wear it soon. So I want to go ahead and jump into the Torah that I want to teach today, and then I'll hang around as long as anybody has questions. If you have questions about the Torah portion, if you have questions about Passover, I've gotten some questions from people who are stressing out a little bit, like Passover is stressful enough as it is when there's no global pandemic going on. And some people are especially stressing, okay, how is this affecting my Passover prep plans? If you have any questions about that, I am here to ease your worries, give you what tips and tricks that I know or what strategies have worked for me and my family in our Passover prepositions of Passover, I guess. But first I want to talk a little bit about Parshat Tzav. So before we get going in teaching, and to make sure all the sound levels are okay so we don't run into that. Okay, I can see there's the camera right there. High five, everybody. Give me a high five on the screen if you're there. Have a little sip of the Move juice. Folgers. I use Maxwell House for my Haggadah, but Folgers for my cup. So, Parshat Tzav, there was a particular phrase that struck me. I was learning this with someone who is preparing to become bar mitzvah. This is a young man who is turning 13, has recently turned 13, and was preparing for his bar mitzvah. And like many people preparing to celebrate Jewish adulthood and newfound responsibility for the commandments, he has unfortunately had to reschedule the celebration. He is still bar mitzvah in the eyes of the Torah. Like, he is responsible for the commandments. He is an adult. He is a leader. And yet, with his family, made a very adult decision to push off the celebration until such time that more people could be together to celebrate with him. But whenever I'm preparing a student who's about to celebrate bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, we get to study some Torah together, and I always learn from what they notice. My primary assignment to them is to say, okay, I don't want you, when you give your Devar Torah, when you teach Torah as an adult in the Jewish community, don't just give me a summary of what's going on, or don't just, print something off the internet and read it to us as, this is the most important lesson in this Torah portion. I really like to see what the students notice as what's most relevant for them. And the line, I'm not gonna give you his Devar Torah because he prepared a great one, and we'll see what he teaches when his bar mitzvah is celebrated, whenever it's celebrated. But he did point out this verse to me that I wanted to share with you, and I've got a little bit of my own interpretation on that. And it's not just mine; I get a little help from my friend Rashi, who is Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki, great commentator from approximately 900 years ago, going on 1,000, looking good, still looking good, Rashi, from what is now France. So first, I'm going to share this verse. I don't have it memorized. My brain doesn't work that way. So I always like to bring out my Chumash. Oh, there was a note in there. There's a drawing that my daughter made. So what I'm quoting out of here in my handy-dandy student Tanakh, it's got this great plastic covering on it that takes a beating and keeps on reading, I guess you'd say. But I'm looking at Sefer Vayikra, that's the book of Leviticus. It's in chapter 6, which is the beginning of Parshat Tzav. Just a couple of paragraphs in, it's on verse 6. And it's talking about setting up the altar that the sacrifices, when they're made, are going to be burnt on. So how the sacrifices work is people would bring an animal to be sacrificed. The priests would harvest that animal, would take that animal's life, would sprinkle some of its blood around, and then take, not all of it, but pieces of it, to be burnt on an altar. And this is talking about the altar itself that the sacrifice is burnt on. And it's saying you have to have a fire, but it's not just, you don't just light a fire every sacrifice time. When it's sacrifice o'clock, somebody bring out their matches and light a new fire. It's handled a little bit differently. In verse 6 it says, Eish tamid tukad al mizbeach, lo tichbe. So that means it's a perpetual fire shall be kept burning on the altar, not to go out. So just logistically, to be really clear, you don't light a new fire for every sacrifice. You keep a fire going on there at all times. An Eish Tamid, an eternal fire or a continuous fire. And we've heard this word Tamid used around fire before. Tamid means always or continuous or perpetual in Hebrew. And when last we met Tamid, Tamid was hanging around not with an Eish, a fire, but a Ner, which is like a light or a fire that has the purpose of giving light. Like when we say Lahadlik Ner Shel Shabbat, or Ner Shel Hanukkah, or Ner Shel Yom Tov. That's a blessing we're going to say here in Passover next week. So when last we saw Tamid being used next to fire, it was a Ner Tamid, an eternal light. And this is specifically in Shemot, in Exodus, in chapter 27, verse 20. It's talking about the menorah. It's talking about this lamp that's supposed to be in the holy sanctuary that is supposed to be kept burning continuously, a Ner Tamid, an eternal light. And you can walk into, well, let me back that up. Normally, you walk into any synagogue. Now there's a lot of synagogues you can't walk into anymore, or if you do, there's nobody there. We're going to talk about that in a second. Normally in a synagogue, even when there aren't people there is a light that is going continuously. And that light is always on, right? I know we like to save electricity, you turn off all the other lights, but not that one. You keep that fire burning. Usually light bulbs and electricity these days, but you keep that light on all the time. And the reason we do that is to connect ourselves to this first mode of Jewish communal worship, the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary, this tabernacle we carried around the wilderness. And then once we had the temple, once Solomon built the temple, we kept that lamp going continuously again. And every once in a while, things happen, it goes out. Enter the story of Hanukkah, right? These the Seleucids, these Hellenized Syrians came in and schmeiced our temple. Not ran our priests out of town, turned it into a temple for something else, and put the fire out in the Ner Tamid. And the first priority, once we cleaned up the temple, in order to dedicate the temple for Jewish use again, the priests, the first thing they wanted to do was light that light again. And I'll wait till Hanukkah to finish that story for you. But that's an important principle. We need to keep this light going continuously. This light represents seichel. This light represents wisdom. This light represents the insight that we get from Torah. There's the Mizbeach, the altar. That's where, let's say, the holy hard labor is done of the sacrifices on one side of the holy sanctuary, and there's the menorah on the other side. And so back in Exodus 27, it said you need to keep this Ner Tamid going. It's probably sounds, but this story seems like a story Tamid at this point. But you keep this Ner Tamid going. Fast forward to Leviticus 6, when it's talking about doing the sacrifices, it uses the same language, but it doesn't say a Ner Tamid, it says an Eish Tamid, an eternal fire, not an eternal light. A very, very fine distinction. But Rashi takes a look at this and says there's no wasted words in the Torah, there's no wasted ideas in the Torah, so this distinction must be there to teach us something. Furthermore, there's a redundancy here. Eish Tamid tukad al mizbeach lo tichweh. An eternal fire shall be kindled on the altar and not go out. So what's the redundancy that Rashi notices? You could have just said a fire will be lit on the altar, never to go out. Why do you have to make it a Tamid fire? Right? Why call it an eternal fire? It's enough to say you like the fire, don't let it go out. So why the apparent redundancy? And he says this is to point our attention at the time of this Eish Tamid. Like when we think about the Eish Tamid, we should be also thinking about the Ner Tamid back in Exodus chapter 27. And this teaches us, according to Rashi, who gets this from sources in the Talmud and elsewhere, that how do you light the Ner Tamid? How do you light the menorah? What, do you just strike a match, rub two sticks together? No. You have to light the Ner Tamid from the Eish Tamid, right? That ignition of fire precedes light. And so the Eish Tamid must come first. Before you light the menorah, you have to light the fire for the sacrifices. And I know we see and apply sacrifices very differently now. And yet, I think we can learn from this that the primary labor of this place has to be initiated before we light the light from which we draw wisdom, right? Work precedes wisdom. You have to labor in this holy space before people can just bask in the glow, bask in the outcome of it, right? And I want to just reiterate that idea. Work precedes wisdom. Sacrifice precedes insight. I think this is what Rashi is trying to teach us from this verse. And I'm going to say, and again, not bragging, not complaining, but I have observed that it takes a lot of work to keep holy spaces going, to keep holy communities going, right? It takes a lot of organization, it takes a lot of elbow grease to have services that people enjoy, to have social activities that people enjoy. Ask anybody who's ever run a gala at a synagogue or any place else. There's a lot of work that goes into it before you can have party time, right? The party time is good, right? The light is important. It may even be the goal, the outcome that you're looking for. But before you can do that, you have to be able to put in the work. And so this teaches us that before you appreciate the services that you go to, or the services that you get to teach at, if you're lucky enough to have a job like I do, you have to be willing to light that altar. You have to light that fire for something that's a little bit more mundane, perhaps, for something that's a little more gritty and ground level. Nothing more gritty and ground level than sacrificing an animal on an altar, I'll say. So this is, I think, what comes to teach us. I'd never seen this insight before this year, what Rashi has to say about the Eish Tamid, the light of the altar, being used to light the menorah. And so if you're looking for wisdom in these times, and I think many of us are, look to the work first. If you're looking for insight into how to get through your day, I'm just going to suggest get up and start getting through it. That's what's working for me right now, is keeping to my routine, getting up, eating on schedule, feeding my kids on schedule, doing those routine walks very safely out in public, maybe with a bandana over my face. I'm feeling like old school Texas cowboy days. But just it's those activities that get your body moving that help you mentally prepare for being inside, doing work remotely, trying to make meaning out of this crisis that we're going through. So that's the Torah that I wanted to share with you today. Feel free to drop off, feel free to hang out. I'll be here as long as you just want to chat or ask questions. Kay Dixie's in the house, says, and now it's twice at least as much work to reconfigure everything for these times. That's, I'll say that's really true, I think. I've noticed this at the place where I work, and I've noticed this about people doing their work. I feel like in some contexts we have tripled the work that we do, or where we used to do one thing, now we do three things. We do the thing that we were doing, right? We have, those of us, I just want to acknowledge there's a lot of people going through unemployment or underemployment, and I really hope we can pull together to make sure those people get through and get what they need. But of the people who are lucky enough to still be working right now, I've noticed that they're not only responsible for doing the work that they were doing, delivering whatever service they were, managing whatever team, supporting whatever team they were supporting. They have the additional work of learning how to do it a new way. So they've got their job, they've got this meta job of reconfiguring their job. And then a lot of people on top of that, whether for personal reasons, because that's how you feel control over the situation, or to bring your team together a little closer, people are taking on additional work, offering services they've never offered before. We've been talking in the community about doing a Havdalah, and it's nice to bring people together that way. And we also acknowledge that we don't normally do a community Havdalah, and we do it on special occasions, and we just encourage people to do that at home. And so, again, there's the work that you're responsible for. There's the additional work in making that happen in a new way because we don't have access to our old tools. And then there's the work that we're doing just to be generous. And so I'm not going to knock any of that. And I think it's great that we're seeing, I'll acknowledge, a flowering of creativity, at least in the Jewish world, but not exclusively in the Jewish world, of people teaching things they've never taught before, people offering services, offering learning, offering, online prayer services, for example. A lot of people didn't have access to that before. I'm not knocking any of that creativity and productivity that's going on. I just want to notice it and to encourage people to take care of themselves, to acknowledge that you may be, while there are some people who are drastically underemployed and at risk, there are also people who are working harder than they have ever worked before. And I want to make sure that if you're in the latter category, you're taking care of yourself. You don't burn yourself out, because we need you. So maybe acknowledge the work that you're doing. Take a step back when you need to take a step back. Open your window, get a breath of fresh air, do some jumping jacks in your living room, whatever it takes, or just chill, just relax. This is a marathon and not a sprint, and we need you at the finish line. So I really appreciate that. Beryl Strauss, great member of the PJTC community, says hello. Hi there, Beryl. Nice to see you. Nawa64 says, we love Havdalah. Yes, that would be great. Carla J coming in online says hello. I see Kay Dixie coming in from YouTube. So we got people from Twitch, from YouTube, from Facebook here in the house. D. Alexon says, mankind cannot gain anything without first giving something in return. To obtain something of equal value must be lost. And maybe this is, kind of the main idea of sacrifice, this idea of whether you're making up for some deficit in terms, and how Leviticus would call it a chet, or a sin offering, or whether you are just grateful and you are moved to give something of yourself in gratitude. It's the generosity that gets the highest return. So Kay Dixie says, "Hi Carla, I love it when people are chatting with each other in here." So Kay Dixie also shares, yes, they say you should try to keep your routine going as much as possible. So I will see that and raise it. I will echo yes. It helps anchor the sanity, and it helps anchor the mental health to keep your routine going as best you can. And I also said you should watch your energy levels. You know, we're not taking on too much at this time just for the sake of feeling like you're in control of the situation. I'll also say this could be an opportunity to shake up some assumptions you've had about how you produce in the world. About I know lots of businesses are shaking up assumptions about whether or not a remote workforce would be viable. 5 years ago or 5 weeks ago, there may be a lot of companies out there that said, you know what, this work from home thing, this remote thing, work thing isn't going to work for us. And now that many companies are having to switch to that model for their workers to stay employed and for the company to be viable, it's questioning a lot of those assumptions. And so take advantage of that moment of creativity if you can. So love to see people talking to each other in the chat. If you have any questions about this week's Torah portion, any questions about Passover prep, I want to share. I shared a little bit of this on Monday, but we had some music issues in the background. I do want to encourage people to, if being in the context of a pandemic is making you more stressed about Passover than your usual level of stress about Passover, I want to encourage you to take that down, maybe with a little bit more parity. So you are only as stressed as you are usually stressed during Passover, because I know it's very stressful for some people. For some people, it's their favorite holiday. For some people, it's very stressful. For some people, it's both. It's their most favorite stressful holiday. I know when I have the privilege of sitting on Batei Din of the rabbinic courts for conversion, and we ask people what their favorite holiday is. And I'm not trying to give you the answers to the test here. The number one answer is Pesach. The number one answer is Passover. It's the number two answer might surprise you. It's actually Yom Kippur. And it's really high up there. It's like a lot of people love Yom Kippur. But a lot of people who are converting, their first introduction to Judaism, as it were, is a Passover Seder. Maybe they're dating somebody who's Jewish, or maybe there's a high school friend who's Jewish and they want to see something different, and somebody goes to a Passover Seder, and it's so different from what people are used to, if you haven't grown up with one, that it really captures the imagination. And so this is a great holiday coming up. And my kids love it because we usually get them treats that they don't get throughout the year, like coconut-covered marshmallows and various Passover candies. But it's also making some people stressed out because their regular stores are understocked or super crowded, and people don't feel comfortable going there. And so they say, well, what do we do if we can't do Passover like we always do Passover? And I just say, let's go back to the original intention of Passover, which was, boom, brand new situation. We've been slaves for a generation or so. First we stay inside to stay alive, good message. And then we have to leave with the flat dough that's on our backs. Like, we have to leave with whatever we can gather in like an hour. It's bug out time. And we'll see what's available to eat on the way. And later on it rains food, which is pretty cool. But in the meantime, we don't have time to go to a kosher grocery store and wait in line. Maybe this year it's not safe to be around that many people close together who are all stressed out about Passover like you are. What do we do? Well, the cool thing is fruits and vegetables, totally kosher for Passover without any additional preparation. So maybe it's the salad year of Passover. When it comes to matzah, maybe you can't find all the matzah that you usually eat, but if you take one bite of matzah at your first Seder, that is enough to fulfill the mitzvah of having matzah for Passover. So maybe you and your friends go in on a co-op for a box of matzah. Everybody gets one. I don't know. We have to do it a little differently this year. There are recipes online to make your own matzah. That could be a fun way to homeschool your kids in science. Who knows? So yes, there's going to be lots of different this year. But all the more so, I think it's going to put us in that frame of mind, in that spiritual space of uncertainty, of going from predictable slavery to unpredictable freedom. So let's see what else is going on in the chat. Nawa64 says, any PJTC Pesach broadcasting plans? So I'll say what we are not doing is we're not broadcasting a Seder per se. A long-standing custom is for the temple to have a Seder on the second night in the temple. And so for people who don't have other plans, or for people who would just rather make their second night plans with us, we've been doing that. And last year was my first one. It was baller. It was absolutely fantastic. We had a lot of fun. Really was looking forward to this one. Not happening. So what we are doing is Cantor Ruth and I record. So I don't want to make too many promises, because we'll see how this recording comes together. I got all my video recording gear, and Cantor Ruth and I, sitting at a respectful, safe distance from one another, went through kind of a model Seder for people to learn from ahead of time, and we recorded that. In the process of editing it, we'll see how it turns out. Hope all my equipment didn't malfunction. That's happened before. But what we are doing is we are live streaming our Passover services. So in addition to these wonderful 6-hour dinners with lots of traditions and hitting people with onions, I don't know, that's a thing in some people's houses. In addition to the Seders, it's Chag. It is a holy festival that has services on the first 2 days and services on the last 2 days, at least in the kind of 2-day Yontif conservative and Orthodox settings. So we are having all 4 of those services at PJTC, the morning services, and Cantor Ruth and I will be leading those on the Passover days. And we have the night, you eat, and the next morning there's a service, and then you eat, and then the next morning there's a service, and then at the end of the week we do it again. So if you want to see what a Passover service looks like, and often this might be an opportunity for you. Often those are during the week when maybe you're in a situation where you can't take off those for holidays and you can't get to a synagogue. This might be some people's first chance to see what a Passover morning service looks like. It's very much like Shabbat. Torah, there's a bit fewer Torah readings. Some of the prayers are different, but it's still a holy occasion to get together, and we will be leading those services, Cantor Ruth and I, and live streaming them just like we live stream Shabbat services. So Carla J says about Passover, the Seders are my favorite, but not so much the whole week. I'm with you. Seders are fun, and you start off with the fun. And then it's not so much you'll have a Seder to commemorate this occasion, but the part of the mitzvah that's, and for 7 days you shall have no leavening in your house or in your possession, that gets to be the hard part. That matzah gets old after a while. And I say that generously. Matzah was born old. It tastes like something that is wonderful. Let me take that back. Matzah is wonderful. It's a mitzvah to eat it, and some people actually really like it. But it's great at the Seder. It's great at the second Seder. It's, isn't this fun for like days 3 and 4? Day 5, day 6, you start to miss how you ate before. But that's okay. That's kind of the point. This is just like other occasions which we acknowledge are different. We separate from the regular world and the regular patterns in order to really drive home this lesson of what it's like to go from slavery to freedom, from captive to redeemed. And, it's not just about that first party at the beginning. It is a process. And yes, that process can get a little hard on the digestive system. And then it's over. And then, I don't know, maybe a question of the day is, what's your favorite post-Passover meal? So if anybody wants to share that in the chat, you're more than welcome to. People have different traditions: pizza, beer, just a bread sandwich, like a piece of bread between 2 pieces of bread. So people have different first Seder meals. Mine's usually pizza. I'm going to say I do love a good slice of pizza. Ruthie's in this house, says, hello, everyone. Nice to see you, Ruthie. So I'm going to sign off here in a minute. We've been going for about half an hour now. But first, I just wanted to share that bit of Torah with you that Rashi notices that it is the altar, the holy work that starts before the holy wisdom comes out, right? The altar is lit before the menorah is lit. In fact, you have to do the work of lighting the altar before you can get the light to light the menorah. So Kay Dixie says, I eat matzah. I eat matzah all year round, actually. Nawa64 says, Michael Pacheco has a question. Looking up, let's see, I'm not seeing Michael Pacheco's question in the chat. So Michael Pacheco 29, if you are in the house, please repost that question. It's not showing up in my chat right now. So this is live TV, folks. So if somebody can repost Michael's question. Let me check that out on Twitch. Maybe I can see it over there. Okay, here we go. I found it. Michael Pacheco 92 says, thoughts on selling refrigerated chametz. I'm thinking of putting refrigerated chametz in a zip-up cooler in the back of the fridge. So thanks for that. So let me back up and address the meta question. A lot of people have concerns. What if I have chametz in my house that I don't just want to throw out because it would actually present an economic hardship, right? You'd have to buy something later that would put you behind. And this the rabbis had to deal with this back in the time of the Talmud. And maybe some guy is a baker and he buys flour for months ahead of time, or you're a farmer who has a silo of grain, and you can't just get rid of that before Passover, just throw it out. Or let's say you own a bar and you have all this whiskey, all these grain products on hand, and it would be devastating to get rid of it. How do we get rid of it and still not lose substantially your livelihood, how you take care of your family? And you can translate your situation differently. So we have this practice called Mechirat Hametz. We're actually working on getting the form together this year at the temple right now, where you sell your chametz. That is, you enter into a mutual sale agreement whereby somebody who's not Jewish, who doesn't have the obligation to get rid of chametz, will buy your chametz from you and then sell it back to you at the end of Passover at the exact same price. And so no money actually has to change hands here, and rabbis and synagogues will broker this transaction for you. Sometimes there's a suggested donation as a brokerage fee. That just goes into the mitzvah fund at the temple for helping people. And so, yes, there's a way to sell chametz. What Michael's asking about is kind of the protocol, like, do I have to all keep it in one place, the chametz that I'm selling? The idea is that you need to get it out of sight, where you're not gonna see it, you're not gonna stumble across it, and also ideally, if the person who bought it wanted to come in and take it, he technically could, or she technically could. So how do you do that with stuff that maybe you've got stuff that's in the freezer that you're saving for a rainy day, or it's in the fridge or something like that? If you're observing not eating kitniot, which is an Ashkenazi practice of some long standing, mustard is considered kitniot, so you don't have mustard on Passover, which is a shame because there's lots of great things that mustard will go good with on Passover. But let's say I just bought a brand new bottle of mustard. Why should I throw that out? So what you do with that stuff is you do just kind of wrap it up and put it out of sight. Just put it in a way that you can't see it. Maybe it's double bagging it. Just make it, put it in something opaque that you can't see it. If it is sort of in a remote part of the fridge that you're not going to accidentally make a sandwich out of it, and you can't maybe see what's in the container, that's even better. So if you're selling chametz, the idea is that if it's just in your cabinets, you bundle it all up into a place and put it out of reach, put it out of sight, and then you sell that. In the situation where it's in a freezer or in a refrigerator, same principle applies. You put it out of reach, or you put it as far out of reach as you can so that you're not going to accidentally eat it, and put it in something where it's sort of shielded from view, or it's not obvious what's inside the container. And I think that will be the best you can do. So I hope that's helpful for you. zip cooler in the back of the fridge, zip up cooler in the back of the fridge. Yeah, just put it so where you can't see what it is. You can't, and that's because the commandment is that you won't eat chametz, you won't own chametz, and you won't see chametz. And so, if you're not eating it, check. You don't own it because you sold it, and you can't see it. Maybe you can see the container that it's in, but you can't see the chametz itself, and I believe that qualifies. So really great question on the particulars of Passover that we're trying to prepare for this year. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap up today's show. We will be back tomorrow live at 3 p.m. Pacific time. As always, I'm your friendly neighborhood Rabbi John Carrier here on behalf of Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center. We're here pretty much daily during the week these days at 3 p.m. Pacific time. You can see us on YouTube. You can see us on Facebook, on the PJTC Facebook page, or my personal favorite platform, twitch.tv/Pasadena Jewish. I'm just going to check the comments real quick. All right, I think we're all good with that. I'm going to sign off. Thanks, everybody, for learning a little bit of Torah with me today, for asking some great questions, and for just stopping by and saying hi to me and to each other. So until next time, Pasadenans and heroes everywhere, peace. Cool.